The boy was sitting at the counter when Dean Martin walked in. Not at a table, at the counter. The kind of seat you take when you are alone and do not want to look like you are waiting for someone who is not coming. He had a glass of water in front of him. Nothing else. The menu was open. He had not ordered. Dean took the stool 2 seats down. He did not recognize the boy. The boy recognized Dean immediately. Most people in Los Angeles in the fall of 1960 did. The boy said nothing. He looked back at the menu. The waitress came. She asked the boy if he was ready. The boy said he needed another minute. She had already asked him twice. He had been sitting at that counter for 40 minutes. Dean watched this. He did not look like he was watching, but he was watching. Something was wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not visibly wrong. The kind of wrong that only shows itself in the gap between a menu and an order. In a glass of water that stays full. In a boy who needs another minute for the 3rd time in a row. This is not a story about a meal. This is a story about what happens when one man notices what everyone else has already decided not to see. And what he does about it. And what that one decision costs him nothing and changes everything. It was October of 1962. Dean Martin was 45 years old. He was between pictures. He had finished a recording session at United Recording Studios on Sunset earlier that afternoon. His producer, Jimmy Bowen, had kept him 2 hours over schedule. The session had gone well. Dean was the kind of performer who made going 2 hours over schedule feel like the most natural thing in the world. He walked out loose, at ease, the way he always walked out. He had sent his driver home an hour early. He did this sometimes. He liked to walk. Not for exercise. Not for the optics of being seen. He liked the particular feeling of a Los Angeles afternoon when no one was immediately asking him for anything. He walked 4 blocks east on Sunset and turned into a diner called Hank's. He had been there before. Not often. It was not the kind of place Dean Martin was expected to be. That was exactly why he went. The counter was half full. A couple at the far end. A man in a work shirt reading a paper. A boy sitting alone with a glass of water and an open menu he was not reading. Dean sat down. He ordered coffee. The waitress, her name tag said Rose, brought it without ceremony. She had seen famous people in that diner before. She treated them the same way she treated everyone else. Dean appreciated that about the place. He drank his coffee. He looked at the menu board on the wall. He was not particularly hungry. He had eaten at the studio. He was there because the afternoon was good, and he did not want to go home yet, and Hank's was 4 blocks from where he was standing. That was all. That was the entire reason. And then he heard the waitress ask the boy again if he was ready to order. And the boy said he needed another minute. And something in the way he said it made Dean put his coffee cup down. You know that feeling when you hear a sentence and the sentence itself is ordinary, but the air around it is not. When the words are fine, but something underneath the words is not fine at all. Dean had that feeling. He looked at the boy, not in a way the boy would notice. The practiced, peripheral attention of a man who has spent 40 years in rooms reading what is happening in them. The boy was maybe 14. His clothes were clean but worn at the cuffs. His shoes had been resoled. His hands were flat on the counter on either side of the menu, not fidgeting, just resting there. The way hands rest when the body is conserving something. Dean looked at the glass of water. Full. The boy had not touched it. That was the tell. A hungry person drinks the water. A person with no money does not drink the water because drinking the water makes the hunger worse. Dean had grown up in Steubenville, Ohio. He had been in rooms where people understood exactly what drinking the water meant. He had not forgotten what that looked like. Here is what nobody ever talks about. Dean Martin's public image was built on abundance. The glass, the ease, the loosened tie. The suggestion that the party had already started before you arrived and would continue long after you left. That image was real, but it was built on something older. Something that came before the glass and the song, and the rooms that filled themselves when he walked in. He had been poor, not the nostalgic, cinematic kind of poor that people mention in profiles to make a famous man seem grounded. The actual kind, the steel mill kind, the gambling house kind, the kind where you counted before you ordered anything, where you knew exactly how much was in your pocket before you sat down at a counter. He had sat at counters like this one. He had looked at menace like this one. He had needed another minute, not because he could not decide, but because deciding meant admitting there was nothing to decide between. He knew what he was looking at, and that knowledge was not a memory he visited. It was a reflex, the kind that does not ask permission before it moves your hand. But there is a question underneath that. Not what Dean recognized, what he chose to do with it, because recognition is not the same as action. Most people in that diner could have looked at the boy and seen the same thing Dean saw. The full glass, the third request for another minute, the hands flat on the counter. Most people would have seen it and decided it was not their business and gone back to their coffee. What was it in Dean Martin that made it his business? What had Steubenville built in him that 45 years of comfort had not dismantled? 3 people were present in that diner at the moment what happened next began to happen. Rose the waitress, the man in the work shirt, and Dean. None of them spoke about it at the time. The account that exists came from Rose. In a conversation with a journalist named Paul Gardner in 1968. Gardner was writing a profile of Dean for a magazine that was ultimately not published. His notes survived. Rose's account is in those notes. Rose had worked the afternoon shift at Hank's for 4 years. She had seen a lot of people at that counter. She had seen the full glass before. She knew what it meant. She had learned not to push. She had learned that asking a third time sometimes made people leave, and leaving was worse than staying. So she asked. She waited. She asked again. And when the boy said he needed another minute, she wrote nothing down and walked to the other end of the counter. She said later that she had already decided what she was going to do when the diner closed. She was going to tell the boy he could have whatever was left in the kitchen. That was the plan. A quiet plan. A private plan. The kind of plan you make when you have been in the industry long enough to know how to do something without making it a thing. And then Dean Martin walked in and sat 2 stools down, and she watched him watch the boy in a way she recognized without being able to name. The way a person watches something that they are already deciding about. She said, "I knew before he ordered. I knew before he moved the stool. I do not know how I knew. I just knew he had already made the decision, and the rest of it was just the mechanics of carrying it out." That is the question nobody asked Rose directly. What did it look like? Not the generosity. The moment before the generosity. The moment when a man looks at a situation and the decision forms without requiring a conversation. What does that look like from the outside? Rose knew. She said it looked like a man putting his coffee cup down. Now see it from the boy's side. His name, in Rose's account, was Michael. No last name. He was 14 years old. He had been in Los Angeles for 11 days. He had come from Fresno on a Greyhound bus with $43 and a plan that had not survived contact with the city. He had been sleeping in a park near Echo Lake, not because he chose to, because the $43 had gone faster than 14-year-old arithmetic had predicted. He had not eaten in 3 days. 3 full days, not a reduced amount, not a small meal, nothing. He had gone into Hank's that afternoon because it was warm and he had run out of warm places to sit that did not require a purchase. He had asked for water because water was free. He had opened the menu because having an open menu meant he was a customer and customers were allowed to stay. He was not there to eat. He was there to be somewhere that felt like the world was still operating normally, where people ordered things and received them, where a glass of water appeared without being asked for, where the radio played something from a year ago and nobody was sleeping in a park. He had been sitting there for 40 minutes before Dean Martin walked in. He recognized Dean immediately. He did not say anything. He looked back at the menu, because looking at Dean Martin would mean Dean Martin might look back. And Dean Martin looking at him would mean someone was seeing him. And being seen, right then, was the most frightening thing he could think of. Why did he not ask for help? Why did a 14-year-old boy sitting at a counter in Los Angeles with nothing in his pockets and nothing in his stomach not ask the most famous man in the room for a meal? That question answers itself if you have ever been in a position where asking for help required admitting out loud what your situation actually was. Some truths are easier to carry in silence. Some doors are easier to leave closed. Michael had the door closed. And then Dean Martin spoke to him. Dean did not make a production of it. He did not signal the waitress. He did not lean over with a broad gesture that the rest of the diner could observe and feel good about. He moved one stool closer. Just that. One stool. He picked up his coffee cup. He moved it one position to the right. He sat down. He looked at the menu on the wall. He did not look at the boy. He said, without turning his head, "The meatloaf here is good. I have had it before." The boy said nothing. Dean said, "I am going to order it. You should get whatever you want." The boy said he was fine. Dean said, "I know, but I am going to be here a while, and it is easier to sit somewhere if you have something in front of you. That is just how these places work." The boy looked at him. Den was still looking at the menu board. Then Dean turned and looked at the boy directly, not with pity, not with the performed warmth of a man doing a generous thing for an audience, with the level, matter-of-fact attention of one person looking at another person and seeing them. He said, "When did you eat last?" The boy looked at the counter. His hands were still flat on either side of the menu. He said, 3 days ago, sir." The diner did not go quiet. Rose was wiping the far end of the counter. The man in the work shirt turned a page of his newspaper. The couple at the far table was talking about something. The radio was playing. Dean did not move. He did not react in a way anyone would notice. He looked back at the menu board. He was quiet for a moment. Then he called Rose over. He ordered the meatloaf. He ordered a cheeseburger and fries. He ordered a piece of apple pie. He ordered a glass of milk. He told Rose to bring it all together. Rose looked at the boy. She looked at Dean. She wrote it down and walked to the kitchen. She did not say anything. She had seen enough to know when something did not require commentary. Dean picked up his coffee cup. He said to the boy, "What is your name?" The boy said, "Michael." Dean said, "Where are you from, Michael?" Michael said, "Fresno." Dean said, "How long have you been here?" Michael said, 11 days. Dean said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Is there someone in Fresno?" Michael said, "His grandmother." Dean said, "Does she know where you are?" Michael looked at the counter again. He said, "No." Dean nodded, not with judgment, just with the acknowledgement of a man who has now received all the information he needs and is deciding what to do with it. The food came. Dean pushed the plate in front of Michael. Michael looked at it. He looked at Dean. Dean said, "Eat first. We will talk after." Michael ate. Not fast, not desperate. The way a person eats when they have been taught not to eat fast, even when everything in them wants to. Dean drank his coffee. He did not watch the boy eat. He looked at the counter. He looked at his coffee cup. He gave the boy the privacy of not being observed in the most private moment a person can have. Most men in Dean's position would have watched, would have wanted to see the impact of the gesture, would have needed the moment to return something. Dean Martin was no tea most men. Here is the question nobody ever asked out loud. Did Dean look away because he understood what it meant to be seen in that state? Or did he already know what he was going to do next, and the meal was just the first part of it? Drop a comment. One line is enough. If stories like this are the kind that stay with you, subscribe. We find the moments that history almost forgot. What Dean did after the plate was empty was not what Michael expected. And it started with a question nobody had thought to ask the boy in 11 days. The plate was empty. The milk was gone. Half the pie remained. Michael had slowed down near the end, his body remembering, before his hunger did, that there were limits to what it could take in at once. Dean waited until Michael put his fork down. Then he said, "Tell me about your grandmother." Michael looked at him, not with suspicion, with the expression of someone who has been asked an unexpected question about something that actually matters to him. He said her name was Eleanor. He said she was 68 years old. He said she lived on a street called Mariposa Avenue in Fresno. He said she had a garden, tomatoes and zucchini and a lemon tree. He said the lemon tree had been there since before he was born. Dean listened. He did not interrupt. He did not redirect. He let the boy talk about Eleanor and the lemon tree the way you let someone talk when talking is the thing they need most right now. Then Dean said, "Why did you leave?" Michael looked at the counter. He said things at home were difficult. He said it in the careful language of a 14-year-old boy who has decided exactly how much of the truth to give to someone he met 40 minutes ago. Dean did not push. He said, "Would you go back if things were different?" Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said yes. Dean nodded. He drank the last of his coffee. He put the cup down. He said, "I am going to make a phone call. I will be back in a few minutes. Do not go anywhere." He stood up. He walked to the payphone at the back of the diner. Rose watched him go. She said later, in Paul Gardner's notes, that she watched Dean at the payphone for several minutes, that he stood the same way she had seen him stand when he was being serious about something, not performing, not casual. Present. She could not hear what he said. The call lasted about 8 minutes. Dean came back. He sat back down. He said to Michael, "There is a woman named Mrs. Alvarez. She runs a shelter 2 miles from here on Alvarado Street. She is expecting you tonight. You will have a bed and a meal. Tomorrow morning she will help you call your grandmother." Michael looked at him. Dean said, "Your grandmother will come get you, or if she cannot, someone will drive you. That part is arranged." Michael said, "How do you know she will come?" Dean said, "Because you told me about the lemon tree. A woman who plants a lemon tree and keeps it for 14 years does not stop wanting her grandson." Michael looked at the counter for a long time. Then he looked at Dean. He said, "Why are you doing this?" Dean said, "Because you needed another minute long enough. You know that moment when someone does something for you that requires them to see you exactly as you are. Not the version you are performing, not the version you wish you were. The actual version, the one sitting at the counter with a full glass of water and an open menu, you are not reading. And they see that version, and they do not look away from it, and they do not make you explain it. They just move one stool closer and order the meatloaf. Michael sat with that for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you." Dean nodded. He put money on the counter, enough for both meals and then some. He stood up. He put on his jacket. He said, "Mrs. Alvarez is expecting you before 7. It is 4 blocks north and 1 block west. You can walk it in 15 minutes. Then he said one more thing. "Call your grandmother before you do anything else. She is wondering." He walked out. The bell above the door rang once, and the diner continued. Rose cleared the plates. The man in the work shirt ordered pie. The couple at the far table asked for their check. The radio played something nobody was listening to, and Michael sat at the counter for another few minutes with half a piece of apple pie in front of him, and a name, and an address, and the particular feeling of a door that had been closed and was now open. Here is something simple you can do right now. If this story reached something in you, the like button is right there. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that stories like this deserve to be found. Not for me, for the next person who needs this story. Stay with it. Dean did not mention it to anyone that evening. He walked back to his car, which he had parked on Gardner Street. He drove home to Beverly Hills. He had dinner with his family. He did not say, "I stopped at a diner today." He did not say there was a boy. He did not say anything about it at all. The next morning he was back at United Recording Studios. Jimmy Bowen had scheduled a 9 o'clock session. Dean was there at 5 minutes to 9. He was professional. He was relaxed. He made the engineer laugh twice before the first take. He recorded 4 songs that morning. One of them would reach the top 20 the following spring. Nobody in that studio knew what had happened in that diner. Nobody asked. Dean did not offer. His publicist at the time, a man named Arthur Mogul, said in a conversation years later that Dean was the hardest famous person he ever worked with to build a public image around. Not because Dean was difficult, because Dean kept doing things that would have made extraordinary press and refusing to let them become press. Mogul said he would do something and I would hear about it later. Always later. Never from him. Always from someone who happened to be there. And by the time I heard about it, Dean had already moved on to something else and had no interest in going back. Mogul said he eventually stopped trying. He said, "You cannot make a story out of a man who does not think what he is doing is a story." That is the second layer, the layer underneath the quiet Tuesday evening, the layer where a man has a system so internal and so complete that it does not require external confirmation to keep running. Dean Martin's system was simple. You see a thing. You do what the thing requires. You move on. No announcement. No accounting. No return. The doing of it was the whole of it. This is the part that gets left out of every version of this story. The glass and the song and the loosened tie were not the performance of a man who did not care. They were the performance of a man who had already taken care of the things that required caring. Off stage, off camera, on a Tuesday afternoon in a diner 4 blocks from a recording studio. The ease was real. It was real because the work underneath it was real. And the work underneath it never asked to be seen. His wife Jean said later, in an interview from 1971, that Dean had days like that sometimes, days where he came home quieter than usual, not troubled, not distant, just quieter, like a man who had used something up that he was already in the process of refilling. She said she learned not to ask about those days, not because he would refuse to answer, because the question itself seemed to make the thing smaller than it was. She said Dean had a way of treating certain things as ordinary that were not ordinary at all, and that asking about them turned them into a story. And Dean did not want them to be a story. He wanted them to be a thing that happened and was handled and was now finished. That was the first layer, the outside layer, the one that looked like an ordinary Tuesday evening in Beverly Hills in October of 1962. Underneath it, something had moved. Rose knew it. She said in Paul Gardner's notes that after Dean left and Michael left, she stood at the far end of the counter and felt something she struggled to name. She said it was not the generosity that got to her. She had seen people leave large tips. She had seen famous people make gestures. She said it was the one stool, the way he moved one stool closer without making it a movement, the way he ordered without pointing, the way he looked at the menu board while Michael ate so that Michael could eat without being watched. She said, he gave the kid the dignity of the meal, not just the meal, the dignity of it. That distinction is the thing does not get passed down in the official version of a famous man's life. The gap between doing a kind thing and doing a kind thing in a way that does not cost the other person their pride. Most people do not know the difference. Dean Martin knew the difference. He had learned it from the inside. Here is the part that gets left out of every version of this story. Dean did not call anyone to confirm that Michael reached Mrs. Alvarez. He did not follow up with the shelter. He did not ask Rose the next time he came in. He did not send anyone to check. He had done what he could do. He had put the pieces in place. What happened next was Michael's to carry. Dean understood that. He understood it the way a man understands, something he learned before he had words for it. That you cannot carry someone else's story for them. You can open a door. You can say, Mrs. Alvarez, 7 o'clock, 4 blocks north. You can put money on the counter. You can look at the menu board while someone eats, so that the eating is theirs. But the walking through the door is theirs. It has to be theirs. Dean knew that. He had walked through his own doors. Nobody had carried him through them. In Paul Gardner's notes from 1968, there is a section where he asks Rose if she ever saw the boy again. She said no. She said she looked for him the next few days, when she was working the afternoon shift. He did not come back. Gardner asked her what she thought happened. Rose said she thought he went home. She said, I think he called his grandmother. Gardner asked how she could know that. Rose said, I cannot know it. But I think about the lemon tree. That sentence is in Gardner's notes. Underlined. No annotation. Just the sentence. I think about the lemon tree. Dean Martin was still performing in the fall of 1962. The Dean Martin show was 3 years away. He was making pictures. He was recording. He was the kind of famous that fills rooms before the marquee goes up. He died in 1995. He was 78 years old. Michael would have been in his late 40s by then. Old enough to have his own lemon tree. Old enough to have people who wondered where he was when he did not come home. Whether he knew the full name of the man who moved one stool closer on an October afternoon in 1960. 2. Whether he thought about that diner, whether he ever tried to find out what to do with the memory. None of that is in any record. Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995. He was 78 years old. He died at home in Beverly Hills. He had spent the last years of his life quietly. After the loss of his son Dean O'Gear in 1987, the performing had continued for a while, and then it had not. He went home. He stayed home. He was finished with the rooms. He had given them enough. Michael would have been in his late 40s by then. If things had gone the way Rose believed they went, if the grandmother had come, if the lemon tree was still there. Paul Gardner never published the profile. The magazine folded in 1969. His notes ended up with a colleague who held them for years before donating them to a small archive of entertainment journalism at a library in Pasadena. The notes sat there. They were not catalogued under Dean Martin's name. They were catalogued under Gardner's. Most people who came to that archive were not looking for Paul Gardner. The note about the lemon tree is on page 14 of the notebook, underlined in pencil. No annotation. No explanation of why Rose said it. No explanation of what Gardner thought it meant. Just the sentence. And then the next question? Some things are like that. They happen in diners, on curbs, at payphones. And then they become someone's private architecture. The kind you build your life around without ever fully naming what it is. This is not a story about a famous man buying a meal. This is a story about the difference between seeing someone and looking at them. Most of the people in that diner on that Tuesday afternoon looked at Michael. The waitress looked at him 3 times. The man in the work shirt looked at him. The couple at the far table may have glanced. They looked at him, and they saw a boy at a counter. A boy who needed another minute. Dean Martin looked at him and saw the full glass of water, and the hands flat on the counter, and the menu that was not being read. And he knew what those 3 things together meant, because he had been that boy. Not in Los Angeles, in Steubenville, not in 1962, in the 1930s, but the full glass is the same glass. The hands are the same hands. The menu is the same menu. Think about someone in your life who saw you when you were trying not to be seen, who noticed the full glass, who moved 1 stool closer without making it a performance. You know exactly what that cost them. Almost nothing. You know exactly what it gave you. Everything. Dignity is not something you can give someone, but you can arrange the conditions for it. You can look at the menu board while they eat. You can order without pointing. You can say, "Call your grandmother. She is wondering." Dean Martin understood this in a way that his public life never required him to demonstrate. He understood it in a diner on a Tuesday afternoon when nobody was watching and nothing was at stake for him except the 30 seconds it took to move 1 stool. Before this ends, think about the last time you saw something. Not walked past it, saw it. The full glass. The open menu. The person who needed another minute for a reason that had nothing to do with the menu. Did you move 1 stool closer? Or did you go back to your coffee? Tell me in the comments. If this story reached something in you, subscribe. Not for me, for the next story. Because the next one is about a man who gave people what they needed before they knew how to ask for it. And it is heavier than this one. There is a booth at the back of where Hank's Diner used to stand. The building is something else now. Has been for years. But in October of 1962, there was a counter with stools, and a radio playing something nobody was listening to, and a boy with a full glass of water and a menu he was not reading, and a man who moved 1 stool closer. He did not make a speech. He did not call anyone to witness it. He ordered the meatloaf. He looked at the menu board. He made a phone call. He said, "Call your grandmother." He put money on the counter. He left. That was enough. That was Dean Martin, the man who made every room feel like a gift. Who knew from a long time ago that the gift was not the room? It was being seen inside it.